True Scary Story is a podcast where people share their own terrifying encounters. It was actually chosen as a podcast of the month on Apple Podcasts' Dark Side collection, and also the top-ranking show on Spotify. Ghost stories, retelling of long-lost memories, and nightmares that seem a little too real. Come find us by searching for True Scary Story on your podcast app, or tell us your own encounter over on truescarystory.com. I'll see you there.
I climbed up onto my neighbor's fence and could see her through the trees. I shouted at her that she had better not hurt my cat again. But then I saw the remains of figures made with salt on her property and candles. "You old witch," I said. "I don't believe in your nonsense. You had better not mess with me, or I'm going to drag you out of your house myself." The moment I said it, I felt a certain regret. I knew I had said something I shouldn't have. Good evening, community. It is a pleasure to once again have the opportunity to listen together, to bring you stories that have reached us, and that I promise will provoke a moment of doubt, a moment in which you suspend your skepticism. Yes, even when it comes to witches. And even if you say you don't believe, I promise that after tonight's stories, you will choose your words carefully. If you ever come across a woman who reminds you of the witches from the stories you heard as children. And if not, that's fine too. Go through life unprepared. We need more protagonists for Tales of the Night. So this is your moment to leave this content and look for something else. Because there is no turning back. Hello, Uriel. Just a few weeks ago I discovered your channel, and honestly, I never thought I would end up writing something here. I always listen to ghost stories the way someone listens to things that happen to other people, especially stories about witches, stories we don't know are true or not, until they happen to us, until it happened to me. I don't know if what I'm about to share has any explanation. Until not long ago, I used to laugh when anyone brought up witchcraft. I have never believed in any of that. But there are things you say with too much certainty, and afterward you almost wish you had never said them. I live alone in a small house. The back of my property borders the home of an older woman. I had never really spoken to her. I would only hear her occasionally when she came out to tend to her laundry or sweep her patio. The wall between us keeps me from seeing her house directly, but when walking down the street behind mine, which for some reason feels much lonelier and darker than my own, I notice that her house is old, built of dark wood, as if it had never been repainted, with marks that looked like water damage. The woman never spoke, but sometimes I could hear her. It wasn't words that came from her mouth, nothing clear, just sounds, as if she couldn't speak, as if she had some kind of speech impediment. From my patio, I could only make out the tops of some trees she had on her property. Between our houses there is a tall wall, so tall that if you don't climb up, you can't see to the other side. And on top of that wall, a black cat began to appear. The cat wasn't mine, and from what I could tell, it wasn't hers either. It was one of those cats that looks thin but agile, with big, very alert eyes. I started leaving food out for it in the patio, even though I had never owned a cat. Little by little, it began to trust me. Little by little, it started spending more time there. It never came inside the house, but sometimes it would come close to my door. The woman behind me hated it. I don't know why. Every time the cat stood on the wall, she would come out and throw rocks at it, make horrible noises at it. I could hear her growling at it in a terrible way, muttering with those wordless sounds she made, but with intention behind them, as if the animal could understand her. Sometimes she would bang on the wall with something to scare it off, and one day, after one of those outbursts from the woman, I saw the cat limping. It was standing on the wall, but it wasn't walking properly. When it came down into my patio, I noticed it had a wound on one of its back legs. It wasn't deep, but it was very swollen, and in that moment I felt a surge of anger, I assumed she had finally hit it with a rock. So without thinking, I grabbed a bucket, pushed it against the wall, climbed up, and leaned over to confront her. I remember shouting at her to leave the cat alone and asking what it had ever done to her. She was in her patio. I could see her silhouette among the trees. She seemed to be sweeping something, but she didn't answer me. She just started making her strange sounds, her low moaning, and for some reason that made me even angrier. I climbed down from the wall and suddenly felt something fall over me. Dirty water. Mud. I don't know what it was, but it soaked my clothes. I moved away and cleaned myself off, but I was furious. So I climbed back up to get a better look and told her that if she touched the cat again, I would go and knock on her door myself. And that was when I got a clearer look at her. Not her face, but I could see her back as she disappeared behind a tree. She was dressed entirely in black. Her clothes looked long, like a heavy floor-length dress. Then she walked slowly toward her wooden house. Before she went inside, I caught a glimpse of something in her patio that I hadn't noticed before. There was something strange there on the ground. I don't know how to describe it without sounding like I'm exaggerating. There were remains of what looked like salt, scattered in shapes that seemed like they had once been drawings, symbols. There were white powders and darker ones. There were ashes. It looked as if someone had traced something and then half erased it. There were also burned down candles. Not many, but I definitely saw them. I was so angry that none of it mattered to me in that moment. I shouted at her, "You old witch!" I told her I didn't believe in any of that nonsense, that I wasn't afraid of her, that if she touched the cat again, I would go kick her door in and drag her out by the hair for going around believing in foolishness. When I said that last part, I noticed something inside her house. She didn't come out, she didn't say a word, but from the window I could see that something was looking out. Just a silhouette. I couldn't make anything out clearly, just a dark shape behind the glass. I climbed down from the wall with my heart pounding, but still angry. I brought the cat inside that night, cleaned it up, disinfected its wound, and decided I was no longer going to let it out into the patio. And that was when what I truly cannot explain began. The first few nights I had trouble sleeping. I felt like I shouldn't have said what I said. I had already regretted it, not because I believed in witches, but because there was something off about the woman. There was something in her sounds, in the way she moved. One night in the early hours I heard what sounded like footsteps on the roof. Not like the cat's footsteps. They were much heavier, slow, like someone walking from one end to the other. I stayed in bed just listening. The little cat, who was already sleeping at my feet, lifted its head and began staring upward. It didn't meow or make any sound. It just stared, fixed on the ceiling. And that happened a couple more times, but with the passing days everything started to calm down. I stopped hearing the footsteps. The cat was doing better. I started to feel like maybe it had just been my imagination. Until my father came to visit me. My father has a woodworking and crafts workshop. He has worked with wood for more than 20 years. He makes frames, carved figures, even small decorative boxes. He is one of those men whose hands are marked by his work. His hands are his main tool. He always says they are the only thing he knows how to do in life. That day he came by in the afternoon. He stayed and talked longer than usual. I told him he should leave before it got dark, because the road to his town is not well lit, but we lost track of time. By the time he left, it was past 11, and I don't know how to explain it, but I felt a bad premonition. And sure enough, 20 minutes later I got a call. It was someone who knew him. They had found him by the side of the road to his town, injured and calling for help. His truck had come to a stop farther ahead among the trees, with the hood caved in. He was saying incoherent things. I asked my neighbors for help and they drove me there quickly. I hadn't spoken to my father yet. I didn't know how he was. You can't imagine how anxious I was during that drive. But at the hospital, at least I saw that he was okay. not too badly hurt physically, though he was saying strange things. He told me something had thrown itself at the truck on the road, that he was driving when suddenly, out of nowhere, something flew straight at the hood. He said it looked like an enormous bird, like a vulture but much bigger, that he had no time to swerve. It hit the hood, he lost control, and drove off the road. He suffered multiple fractures in his right arm. He nearly destroyed his hand. The doctors feared he might lose mobility. They said he might recover some function with therapy, but they couldn't guarantee it, and they didn't know when. My father asked me to go look for his phone. It had been left inside the truck somewhere during the accident. There was no one else there, so in the morning I had to go alone. The truck was still on the side of the road. The hood was caved inward. I expected to find feathers, or blood, or even the animal itself. Something that would confirm it had been a bird, but there was nothing. I moved closer and realized the marks on the hood were not claw marks. On the hood were the marks of 2 hands, clearly imprinted in the metal, as if something had launched itself and grabbed onto the hood with both hands just before the impact. The fingers were pressed into the sheet metal, 5 indentations on one side, 5 on the other. I stood there staring at those marks for a long time. There was no sign of an animal, no blood, only those hands. A couple of weeks have passed since the accident. I haven't seen the woman from behind my house again. When I passed down that street, I saw that her house remains closed up. I haven't heard footsteps on the roof either, but I don't go near the wall anymore. The cat sleeps inside now. Sometimes he sits in front of the back door, staring toward the wall, without making a sound, without setting a paw outside. He just stares. I hope my father recovers some movement in his hand. As I said, it is how he earns his living. And even though I don't regret defending the cat, I think I should have done it differently. Never mock someone you suspect might be a witch. Good evening, Uriel. I'm writing to you again from Nicaragua. This story wasn't something I experienced myself. It was experienced by my grandmother, and it's something she told me many times since I was a child. She is a very religious woman, the kind who never misses mass even when she's sick. She is not someone who invents things to frighten people. Not at all. When she was young, she had to move to the capital to work and support my mother and her siblings. At that time, transportation was scarce. There was only one small bus that made the journey from the north to the city. The trip was long, and it always arrived very late at night. She told me that on that occasion the bus arrived at around 11. There was a full moon and the sky was clear. The bus terminal was about 1 kilometer from her house, so she had to walk. Her house was humble, made of tin, wood, and cardboard. The streets in that area were narrow and unpaved. At that hour there was no one outside, only the distant sound of dogs barking. She walked quickly and cautiously, not out of fear of anything supernatural, but out of fear of being robbed. She was carrying her belongings in a small bag and didn't want to lose anything. That was when she heard the first sound. A moan. It didn't come from any particular house. It was as if the wind was carrying it. A low, drawn-out lament. Then she heard something else. A sound like fingernails scraping against the tin walls of the houses. She grew uneasy but didn't turn around. She told me that when you feel something like that, you know you must not turn around, that there is something you must not see. She kept walking faster, praying under her breath, and then she heard footsteps. Slow, but long. They didn't sound like normal footsteps. They sounded as if something was striking both sides of the street as it advanced, as if it were brushing against the wooden fences and poorly parked cars. She clutched the medallion she wore around her neck and kept walking. She told me her feet felt heavy, as if it were harder and harder to move forward as the thing drew closer, like in a dream where you cannot run. Only a few meters were left to reach her gate, and then, by instinct, she turned around. She says it was just a few meters behind her. A tall being, very tall, very thin. But what struck me most when she described it were the arms. They were long, far too long, stretched out to either side, touching the fences of the houses on both sides of the street, as if it spanned the entire width. Its head hung down against its chest, drooping, as if the neck could not hold it up and had twisted forward, and its mouth hung open. It wasn't running, but it wasn't moving slowly either. It moved with long strides, covering distances without seeming to exert any effort. My grandmother says she did not scream. She simply opened the gate as best she could, went inside, and slammed it shut. From inside, she could see that thing brush against her fence, and then continue on its way, slowly moving off as the moaning grew quieter. That was not the only time she saw it. On another occasion, my mother and my aunt were running home at dusk. My grandmother came out when she heard the commotion and caught a glimpse of it in the distance, behind them. The same being again, taking long strides that nearly caught up to them. They came inside crying and locked themselves in with their siblings. The banging against the tin walls lasted a few minutes, moving down the street and fading away, and then everything fell silent. My grandfather arrived a short while later after his guard shift in the early morning hours. By then, there was nothing outside. My grandmother never walked alone so late again, and to this day, whenever I pass through those silent streets at night, though thankfully I almost never have to, I remember what she told me, her stories. And even though I have never heard that moan, and I have never seen anything myself, when there is something I don't recognize, a strange sound, I make a point not to turn around.
True Scary Story is a podcast where people share their own terrifying encounters. It was actually chosen as a podcast of the month on Apple Podcasts' Dark Side collection, and also the top-ranking show on Spotify. Ghost stories, retelling of long-lost memories, and nightmares that seem a little too real. Come find us by searching for True Scary Story on your podcast app, or tell us your own encounter over on TrueScaryStory.com. I'll see you there.